Hi guys, welcome back to Sin and Tonic. Today's true crime story is that of Donald Neilson, aka the Black Panther. So let's go! Sin and Tonic! Two things to have a little note of today. One, last week's video I noticed when I was editing that you can quite consistently throughout the whole thing hear the dog snoring. If you hear any rumblings and stuff, it's the dog. He might occasionally do that or fart. So we'll just see what we get. Point two was, that's flown out of my mind pretty quick. Oh, my eye. I don't know if you can see it, you probably can. Got a sty in my eye. The dog has now graced us with his presence. Keep your ears out. Let's start from the very beginning. Donald Neilson was actually born Donald Nappy, on the 1st of August in 1936. There's not much written about his early childhood that I could find. However, I watched a very interesting documentary and they interviewed a childhood friend of his, so you could get a little bit of insight into his childhood. So when he was 10 or 11, his mother sadly died from breast cancer. She was only 33. This is obviously really traumatic for any child, and it was a really pinnacle point in Nappy's young life. His childhood friend said that it was an unhappy childhood. In fact, he said it was the worst, Nappy's childhood was the worst childhood that he knew of at the time. So it didn't sound very pleasant. And after his mother had died, his dad didn't seem to be very interested in the children, and he would often have different female visitors, some of which would get on with the children, some of which would not, and quite often Nappy would be kicked out of his own house and told to go away. This old school friend described it as a bit of a bleak childhood, really. He also described Nappy as adventurous. He was always looking for ways to challenge himself, to do things so that he could prove he was better than the best at something or better than other people. His old school friends said that anything that they would have to think twice about and think, oh, should we do that? Don't know. He would just go ahead and do it. He wasn't scared and he was quite adventurous. He was a risk taker. That's how he described him. When Nappy turned 18, he joined the National Service. Now, this was the time of his life. He thoroughly enjoyed National Service duties. He went to Cyprus, he went to Kenya. He enjoyed the discipline, so he really liked that, and he liked the structure of the army. He thrived on it. This was the best time of his life. And when he was 18 also, so later on, that same year, he met his wife, a local girl that he met, Irene, and they married. And after a while, she convinced Nappy to leave the army and to settle down and come home and live in Bradford and start a family. In 1960, Irene and Nappy had their daughter, Catherine, and it was at this time that he decided that he was going to change the family name. So he had been teased when he was young for his surname and also in the National Service, and he changed her name by default to Neilson. As a young man, Neilson didn't have much luck. The house is making all sorts of noises today. I'm not pleased. Whew. As a young man, he didn't have much success with traditional jobs and making an honest living. He tried his hand at many things. He tried his hand at building, carpentry. He even bought a taxi firm. And it was said that the name of the person that he bought the taxi firm from was Neilson, and that might be where he picked his surname from. However, I also read somewhere that they used to get ice cream once a week or something, and that was from an ice cream truck and the guy was called Neilson. Who knows? He picked that name. So he was unsuccessful in building and carpentry, taxi firm. He tried his hand at some security work and that didn't go down very well either. He was just really unsuccessful in everything that he tried to do. During this time of all of these jobs that he wasn't getting anywhere with and all of the financial stress that he was then under as the main breadwinner, he would, for fun, take his wife and his daughter up onto the moors, and he bought like a Jeep, like an army Jeep thing, ones that they used to use like in America. And him and his wife and his daughter would go up onto the moors and he would make them play army like strategies and games and things like that. So that was what they did on a weekend. He was, from the sounds of it, just generally miserable. He had loved his time in the army. It was such a big thing for him and he enjoyed it so much. And then even to the point where like he's at home making up games to play, using his wife and his daughter as things. Like, he was obsessed with the army and really he should have just stayed in there. However, that is not the case. That is not what happened. Life isn't being good to Neilson. So in 1965, he has a smart idea of burglaring. What? Is that even a word? No. This is when he turns to a life of crime. So from 1965 to 1967, the guy starts robbing houses. He doesn't just rob one or two, oh no, hundreds of houses. And he's a crafty bugger. So what he was said to be doing was things like he would burgle like a certain amount of houses and he would always take a radio and leave it somewhere nearby, something like that. And then the police would sort of like connect it all together. And then they would be like, oh, this guy's like, and then that would get like released into the press or whatever. And then he would stop doing that. So it was always like cat and mouse. He was always sort of playing games and enjoying the general spotlight on him. So this became a thing. Now that he had started this lifestyle of robbing houses and getting attention from the police and in the press, even though it was quite mild, he liked that. That's something that he was enjoying. And Neilson is never happy. So he was not happy trying to make an honest living and nothing was successful. Now he's robbing houses and he's robbing hundreds of houses and he's getting a little bit of, you know, he's liking what he's getting with this sort of attention, but it's not enough. So he moves on. He robbed a house, and I believe when he robbed the house, he stole a couple of guns and some ammunition. He puts two and two together and he thinks, I'm not making a lot of money doing this. I'm not making loads of money robbing these houses, and it is quite a risk. The police also gave him the name of the bit and brace robber, because I don't know what this is, but it's called a bit and a brace, and he would do something and then use a screwdriver, and that is how he was getting into every house. So he had this name for himself. He had the taste of the media attention and the police attention, even though it was small. And then he'd robbed these guns and he thought, I can move on to bigger and better and make more money. Greedy. So between 1967 and 1972, Neilson robbed about 18 or 19 small post offices. And he went for these small post offices because they are less heavily alarmed, monitored, whatever. So they're easier for you to break into. One thing that Neilson took with him from his days in the army, which he enjoyed so much, was planning and preparation. Excuse me. I think I had a lemon pip. Better. So 1972. Now this is where things start getting spicy for him. One thing that the army has massively prepared Neilson for is preparation. So whenever you're going to do anything, you prepare, and you can't fail. So he was very, very skilled at preparing and really taking his time and making sure that he had his plans down. So he was really, really prepared to do whatever he needed to do for whatever task he was going to do. So whether that be his robberies and things like that, he got away with hundreds and hundreds of robberies. I read somewhere it was like 400 in the space of 2 years. So this guy was good. He would watch and like do surveillance and things like that. So he was very good at like preparing for these jobs that he was doing. In 1972, Neilson got into his first bit of trouble with his armed robberies of the post offices. So he went to a post office and was confronted by Leslie Richardson. So Neilson had broken in and was in the bedroom of Leslie Richardson and his wife, and they woke up to find him, this intruder, in their bedroom. And it didn't go to plan for Neilson, so he ended up being almost overcome by the postmaster, Leslie Richardson. So he had gone there to break in, to get the keys, to get the money, to get postal orders and things like that so that he could rob it, and it didn't work out. So Leslie Richardson called his bluff, basically. So Neilson had his 2 guns, and he had a black balaclava, and he wore all black. And he spoke in a fake West Indian accent to throw him off the scent. So he said, "This is loaded," like about the gun, because I think he thought the way that like Richardson was coming at him, he was like, "Oh my God, like I've got a gun, mate, like chill out." But this didn't like put Richardson off, the postmaster. He came towards Neilson, got the gun and said, "Let's see," and shot a couple of bullets into the ceiling. "Who's this, Richardson? Get in." He's like, "Oh, whatever." And then a kerfuffle happened. Neilson stamped on Richardson's foot and broke loads of bones and toes and things in his foot. And in a bit of a whatever went down, Neilson's balaclava came off. So they saw the face of Neilson, which is something else. So this really went badly. Neilson ran away, and that was the end of that. He didn't get any money or anything. But the whole ordeal did not go to plan at all. I suspect, my personal opinion, that he just expected if he had a gun that these people are just going to do whatever he says. And it just turned out that Richardson was like, maybe he didn't believe that it was a real gun. Maybe when he shot fires into the thing, he's like, "Oh my God." But it didn't go, these people weren't just like, "Oh, okay, whatever you want." And it went badly. There was an altercation and he ended up with nothing. So all of that, all of the prep, all of this, all of the adrenaline, and he's come away empty-handed. This would have been a big trigger point for Neilson. He would have never, ever wanted that situation to happen again. He continued with the armed robberies of post offices. In the February of 1974, Neilson entered the home and the post office of Donald Skeeper, I'm not sure, sorry. He was confronted by, or found, the 18-year-old son, and he asked him where are the keys for the post office. So he was just going to break in, take whatever he could and get out there. So the 18-year-old son took him upstairs to his father's bedroom, where his father was asleep with his wife and mum, and he woke his dad up. When he woke his dad up, his dad said something along the lines of, "Let's get him," to the son, thinking there's 2 of us, 1 of him, maybe we can do this. And unfortunately, probably because of what had happened previously in his other failed robbery, he shot Mr. Skeeper in the chest. So then he fled the scene. The 18-year-old son called the police, and it was really sad. Mr. Skeeper passed away in his wife's arms before anyone got there. So that was Neilson's first murder. So twice now he's come away empty-handed. In September of 1974, again, he intrudes into the home and post office. At 4 a.m, Mr. Astin is woken up by an intruder in his bedroom, Neilson. He manages to push Neilson out into the hallway. Neilson shoots him in the shoulder and the lower part of his body somewhere. And unfortunately, Mr. Astin dies of his injuries. And again, Neilson goes away empty-handed. At this address, he fell down the stairs and was injured, got up and managed to escape. This was the murder that gave Neilson the title of Black Panther. There are a bunch of witnesses now to these robberies, and every time they all said the same thing: black balaclava, black clothing, and that he was really quick and svelte and like good on his feet. So that gave him the name the Black Panther. I believe the wife of the second murder victim said he moved like a panther. So he now has this name. He is now the Black Panther. And then not long afterwards, in November of 1974, he tries again. This time, he does not enter the bedroom of the postmaster. He tries something new, because so far what he's been doing hasn't worked out, has it? So he tries something new. He knocks on the door. When the postmaster answers the door, Neilson has a bottle or some contraption with ammonia, and the idea is that he answers the door and he's going to like shove it in his face and like startle him and whatever. But for some reason, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I don't know how it happened, but he ended up squirting himself in the face with the ammonia. For someone that's meant to be like all like really good at all the prep and everything, he keeps on like really fucking this up. So he gets squirted in the face somehow with the ammonia that's meant for the guy answering the door. There's all this commotion. It means that he's whipped his balaclava off. So everyone here is now seeing his face. He's got Mrs. Graylands and the postmaster Grayland. They're standing there, and he shoots the gentleman, Mr. Graylands, and he then beats the wife severely to the point where he basically left her for dead. Terrible man. So he's killed the husband with the gun and really beaten her up. Like, why he didn't just shoot her, but thank God he didn't, because she did survive her injuries. She had 3 fractures in her skull. So he really went to town on poor Mrs. Grayland. She then was another witness, and all of the witness statements for some reason they didn't all add up and match up, really. It was all a bit bizarre. So there's a lot of things in this case where you're like, if only this or if only that. It's really frustrating. Like when you watch a horror film and they go in that room, you're like, no, don't do that. Turn a light on, take a torch. Like that. This case is kind of like that. You're like watching this thing unfold and you're like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? It is a frustrating one, if I'm honest. Neilson has now murdered 3 postmasters, and he has gathered the reputation, the name of the Black Panther, and a reputation for just being like heartless and cold-blooded and just like he doesn't care, and ruthless is the word I'm looking for, ruthless. He's gathered this is the thing. However, he is still not happy with the amount of attention that these things have got. He knows that the police have linked all 3 together. They linked them through descriptions from the witnesses. The bullets were linked and things like that. So they knew that this was the same guy. He's got the name the Black Panther, and still Neilson isn't it's just not hitting the spot. He wants more. He's hungry for it now, and greedy. He's not getting... It doesn't sound like he's very good at actually getting any money out of these robberies. He's just going around shooting people. So he wants some money. He wants something where he can do it once and get like a big chunk of money, rather than these, like the little houses, that wasn't getting him much. And then the post offices. So he starts to think he needs a new plan. He needs something else. Then he remembers back in 1972, he has read a newspaper article, and it was all over the press, about court case that was going to go on for the wife of a deceased coach company owner to inherit estate from her husband. So she was married to this man, and he in his will had left everything to his daughter, his son, his mistress, who the daughter and the son, that was their mother, and she was getting nothing. So there was this big scandal going on that she wanted what she deserved as his wife. So that's all in the newspapers, 1972. He remembers this and he's like, So he gets planning, introducing Mr. Whittle. Mr. Whittle had a wife called Selena, a mistress called Dorothy, and 2 children with Dorothy, Leslie Whittle and Robert Whittle. Due to insurance purposes and things that I don't understand, he had split his his fortune, if you like, between his mistress Dorothy, his son Robert, and Leslie, his daughter. So Leslie was set to inherit, or was inheriting, £82,500. That's a lot of pennies when you're 17 years old. And his wife, no, the wife got nothing. Let's remember that. She's pissed. Dorothy, I believe it was in the region of like 100,000, same with the son and all of these properties that he owns and the coach company. So like that's a lot of money. Neilson, he's thinking, that's a lot of pennies. I can get a load of money out of these guys if I can extort it out of them. How can I do that? Kidnap. So he goes about devising this plan. He watches the house. He's doing his planning like he does from his army training. He is prepared. He knows what to do when they're in, when they're out. He's been watching, like making notes of like when police are around, when the milkman's there, loads of stuff. The family, like their comings and goings. And that's how he devises his plan. It's a plan that I believe was like 2 years in the making. On the 14th of January 1975, this is the night that Neilson decides to abduct Leslie Whittle. He's done all his planning, he knows what he's doing, and he goes for it. He takes his little green Morris Minor and parks it nearby, and he breaks into their house, breaks into Leslie's bedroom and wakes her up in the middle of the night. She's allowed to put on a dressing gown and slippers. I think that might be all that she was wearing. So she puts on the dressing gown and slippers. I read that he gagged her, tied her up. He left a ransom note on a box of chocolates, and the ransom note was creative. So there's like dino tape, like tape, like a little thin tape like this, and you can punch letters into it. It's like a thick sort of tape, and he did the whole ransom note on this long piece of tape. So he did that, and he left that there with instructions. Shbing bang! The following morning, Dorothy notices that Leslie hasn't come down for breakfast. Up she goes, she's not there. Very unusual. Dressing gown and slippers are gone as well. So that's like, what? What's going on? And then that's when she goes downstairs and she finds this tape. Dymo tape is what it's called. She finds the Dymo tape with this ransom note and just, whoa. Like, can you imagine? It says on there not to ring the police. I'll read it to you. No police. £50,000 ransom to be ready to deliver. Wait for telephone call at Swan Shopping Centre telephone box 6 p.m. to 1 p.m. If no call, return following evening. When you answer, give name only and listen. You must follow instructions without argument. From time you answer, you are on a time limit. If police or tricks, death. Swan Shopping Centre, Kidderminster, deliver 50,000 in a white van. 50,000 in all old notes. 25,000 in £1 notes and 25,000 in £5 notes. There will be no exchange. Only after 50,000 has been cleared will victim be released. That must have been a long bit of tape. In the meantime, Neilson had taken Leslie to an unused drainage shaft. You go down the ladder. There's some pictures of it. It looks grim. There's a ladder that you go down, and then some of the way down is a very small ledge. I think it said 5 foot by 2 foot. It's a small ledge in the drainage shaft, so like a round circle, and then this ladder going down at that, and then there's this ledge sort of like kind of in the middle of the thing, and then there's more ladder going down again. So he popped her on this ledge. He popped a wire noose around her neck, and I did read that the wire noose was padded with elastoplast, like plasters and things like that to stop it from cutting in. I read that somewhere. He had popped a sleeping bag on the ledge. There were some books. Here is where the first mistake of the whole thing went down. Very quickly, after the police were involved and the ransom note was read and all of this, and they're all involved and they're all deciding what to do, the media found out. And the media, a journalist or a reporter, gave the story to a local news station who then broadcast it all out. So first of all, like, what? Like, that was just stupid. It was just a really stupid move. Somehow, Robert, Leslie's brother, misses the first opportunity to get to the phone box. On the second day, he receives a recording of Leslie herself, and she is giving instruction, direction, and saying that she's okay over the telephone via a recording. The recording said for him to go to a telephone box, a particular telephone box, and there would be further instructions hidden behind the telephone box, and he was to then follow that. So after the police have all checked out and made sure it's her voice and all this and that and the rest of it, off they go to the telephone box to find the second set of instructions, which he really struggled to find. This made him later than possibly he would have been. Eventually he finds it, and the instructions say, I shall read them to you. Go to the top of the lane and turn into no entry. Go to the wall and flash lights. Look for torchlight. Run to torch. Further instructions on torch. This didn't happen. He didn't know the area, and this was 60 miles away from where he lived, all of these instructions and telling him where to go. So it was all a bit confusing, and he got lost twice. Also, second frustration, the communication between the police in this part of the country and the police here and that department and this department, it didn't really work. And they didn't want to tell the police department of where this situation was going down all of the information. This is what I gathered. So it wasn't very good communication going on. There was meant to be no police in the area when they realised where the instructions were for him to go. There were meant to be no police there whatsoever because it might spook him off or whatever. Also, if they had asked the police of that local area to be of more assistance, it would have been likely that Robert would have got there on time, but he got lost twice because they weren't familiar with the area and nobody really knew. But if they were in communication with this police department of where it was, there were so many things like that going on that it was just like talk to each other, communication. It didn't seem to have very good communication between the police departments. So that was just really frustrating. And after everything that went down, Robert, the brother, did say that he completely held the blame on the police and it was a bungled operation. So eventually, Robert gets to this location, Bathpool Park, and he's 90 minutes late. That's a hell of a long time. Also, witnesses that were at Bathpool Park at the time say that there was a Panda car, a police car, in the area going around, driving around. So Neilson, in all of the planning and preparation, hadn't accounted for this. There were people in the park that he didn't expect to be there. There were police that were driving around in this Panda car, and it scared him off. He was not there when Robert got there and flashed his headlights. Nothing happened. So frustratingly, Robert had the £50,000. He had the cash. So the whole family were like, yeah, just do it. Let's give them the money. Let's get Leslie back. And it went terribly, terribly wrong through all of these faults along the way. One group of police officers from West Mercia Police put the blame on Staffordshire Police because of the police car that was in the area that shouldn't have been there. The communication wasn't fabulous, and they said, well, if they'd have told us this, we would have done that, and if they'd have said this, we would have done this, and everyone's just trying to cover their bum. At the end of the day, the drop was late, and all of these mistakes along that way led to him not getting there to drop off the ransom money. All the while that this was going on, the police officers had no idea that the Black Panther was Leslie Whittle's kidnapper. There was no connection here at all. It was only later on when a green Morris Minor was found in a car park not far away from another shooting that had happened on the same night that the ransom was meant to have happened. So what is believed to have happened is that without the ransom drop-off, Neilson needed another plan. He needed some money, and he attempted to raid a security depot. He got scuppered by a Gerald Smith, and Gerald Smith, who was the security guard, said, "I'm going to ring the police," turned around and Neilson shot him 6 times in the back. And for a year or so, Gerald Smith was surviving in hospital, and unfortunately he did later on die. In all of this mess, so a bad night for Neilson, nothing happened with this drop-off of his £50,000. He's got Leslie in a shaft, and he's failed to raid the security depot and shot somebody 6 times in the back. In his frustrations, anger, he leaves his green Morris Minor not very far away from the body of Gerald. And this is how eventually he gets tied and everything gets tied together. In the car that the police find 8 days later are dymo tapes with more instructions printed on that would have then led Robert Whittle to the drop for the money. They also found voice recordings of Leslie in the car, as well as a sleeping bag and other items that tied this car to the abduction of Leslie Whittle. They also found a gun in the car, casings, ammunition, and these were all then connected with the Black Panther killings and robberies. So this is when the police realised Leslie Whittle has been abducted by the Black Panther. And this was not a great discovery for them at all. So, unfortunately, Leslie Whittle died in the drainage shaft that she was being kept in. The theory is that Neilson got so cross on that night when he was meant to be getting his ransom money for Leslie that nothing happened and it all went wrong, that he went back into the drainage shaft and he pushed Leslie off of her platform that she was on, her small platform, and therefore hanging Leslie. However, there was another suggestion, and this was part of the defence for Neilson. They argued that he had been trying to keep her comfortable in the shaft. He had given her food, he had given her a sleeping bag and books to read, things like that, and that the wire had been padded with elastoplast or plasters and things like that to make it so that it wasn't going to rub. So they argued, why would he do these things if he was then going to kill her? Although the prosecution said that it was in a fit of rage. So he'd done it because the ransom money hadn't worked out and her brother hadn't delivered the ransom money. The defence also argued that if it wasn't for the wire snagging on a stanchion, they call it, I think it's like a metal bar, basically the wire that she was hanging from had snagged and her feet were only inches away. This poor girl, like anything that could have gone wrong went wrong for her. If she was only 6 inches or 7 inches away from the bottom, and if the wire had not have snagged, she would have just landed on her feet, maybe broken a leg, but she would have landed, she wouldn't have been strangled. Neilson remained at large after this for most of 1975, and he went back to his old ways of the post office robberies. The police were still trying to find the Black Panther killer and Leslie Whittle's murderer. They were still trying to find this man and convict him and arrest him. Oh, cheers! On December 11th, 1975, 2 uniformed police officers are going about their business and they spot a shifty looking man with a bag near a post office. They go over, they start questioning said man, Neilson, and he gets really shifty, really shady, he freaks out and he pulls a shotgun on them. He swiftly gets them to enter their car and he pops the shotgun up underneath the armpit of the driving officer. And he just keeps on saying to them, like, drive this, drive here. Have you got any rope? He's asking them if they've got rope in the car. He's directing them towards a forest, they think, and they just think, like, he's going to basically take us somewhere, tie us up and shoot us both. So one of the police officers in the back of the car, he's like messing about, like looking around, trying to find rope that isn't in the car. And all the while, like, trying to communicate with the other officer, like, apparently they were like looking at each other and, you know, trying to communicate through their eyes in the mirror. It all got like a bit like sketchy and a bit scary. And then eventually there's this point where the guy in the back is just like, come on, let's do it now. He slams on the brakes, the shotgun goes off, it shoots one of them in the hand. The other guy like opens his door and rolls out of the car. It sounds like a film, honestly. He like rolls out of the car, gets out, finds this guy, rips him out of the passenger seat, gets the gun and holds the gun to his head. Apparently he holds the gun to his head and like pulls the trigger and says he's going to kill him. But luckily the gun doesn't work, so he doesn't actually end up shooting him in the head. Yeah, so then Neilson is like apprehended. Didn't go that smoothly though, because he was like what did they say? Like a wild animal. So he was like, like really fighting, and they were stopped outside like a fish and chip shop, outside the Chippy. And these young lads were just sort of there, like watching about, and they see all this commotion. They go over and they beat him badly. They're like, so all of these guys managed to like get Neilson subdued, and the handcuffs go on, and Neilson is then arrested. And the police officer, one of the police officers says, like that he just knew it was him. Like he was like, I just knew that we'd got the guy. Can you imagine that feeling? Like this guy that's like been terrorising the area, and then you're the policeman that's like arrested Neilson. Yeah, that's buzzing. On July the 1st, 1976, Neilson was unanimously convicted, and he was given a life sentence for every murder that he committed, which was 4 in total, because at the time in the UK, he couldn't be tried for the murder of the security guard. He was also given a life term for the grievous bodily harm of Mrs. Grayland, as he should. He was also convicted of kidnap, burglary, blackmail, making threats to kill, and possession of firearms. So he had a little list going on there, didn't he? The trial judge told him that in his case, life would mean life, and that the only way he was getting out of there was with extreme age or infirmary. Here's a cheers to Tony White and Stuart Mackenzie, who were the arresting officers of Neilson. And in conclusion, it's a very frustrating case. Through no fault of her own, Leslie Whittle was left in that shaft, and despite so many attempts by her brother and her mother to have the cash, deliver the cash, get their daughter back, it all went wrong, which is so incredibly sad. Irene, Neilson's wifey, she was then later on convicted for cashing in 80 of the postal orders that her husband had stolen. She argued that this was at his request and that he forced her to do it. She served 8 months in the end. She maintained that she would not have gone to prison had she not been Neilson's wife, and that everybody was out for her blood after his trial and his conviction. And on the 18th of December in 2011, when he was 75, Donald Neilson died in Norwich prison. Quite the story, hey? It was so much so that it was made into a film called The Black Panther in 1977. And so that is the story of Donald Neilson, aka the Black Panther. I would really love it if you could join me next week for another true crime story and a glass of gin. Bye! Bye! Thanks for watching. See you next week.